Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We have an amazing show.
We do, coming at you this Thanksgiving Eve. All right, so we got friend of the show, Michael Brooks, in the show to tell you what you need to know about Brazil, its implications for the U.S. and globally. We got Michael Moore in the show talking about politics sort of broadly and, looking at the 2020 race. And there's some new polls that we have to dig into, including one that has, actually two, that have Warren losing half her support in 1 month. So we're going to dig into all of that. But we've also got an update this morning on what's going on with impeachment. Judiciary Committee is set to take up hearings next week as they weigh whether to write articles of impeachment, as if that's any surprise.
Oh, gosh, yes.
I wonder what they're going to do.
Here's the funny thing, though. The hearings are next week, December 4th, right?
Right.
Not that many legislative days until the Christmas break. I think it's around December 20th. So they have 16 legislative days in order to have a hearing, write the articles of impeachment, and then hold a vote on the House floor as to whether the impeachment should be sent to the Senate during the new year.
Right.
That, look, in Washington time, that's a lot. That's not very much time.
Right.
And remember, people, the longer that they delay that House vote, the sooner that, or the later that trial in the Senate is going to happen. And these Democratic Senate candidates, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, and others, are going to be sitting 6 days a week here in D.C.
Right.
That should be a nightmare scenario.
What's being reported this morning by the AP and other sources is that the goal is to have a vote on impeachment before Christmas, so that basically January will be taken up by a Senate trial, which of course, takes Warren and Sanders in particular. The other candidates are kind of out of the race at this point. Warren and Sanders in particular off the trail at like the most critical juncture. I mean, February is when this all starts to go down.
Right.
So I don't know that,
and I
really don't know that anyone has really wrapped their heads around just how monumental and bad a thing is for those campaigns.
I also forgot for the timeline, USMCA, it's being said, will either be passed next week or the week after, the trade agreement. So, they're also going to do a monumental trade agreement through the U.S. Congress. This is, by the way, I am extraordinarily skeptical on both of this. And again, the longer that they push that vote, even if it's before Christmas, after Christmas, whatever, if they do it after Christmas, it's still going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
Because then what? The trial could go all the way into March. I mean, think about it, all the way through South Carolina and some of these other states. That is such a massive blow to the party. And think about how much earned media and oxygen that's going to suck out of the room that will just destroy so much of the primary process.
Well, and look, this is what I want people to know. Look, I know a lot of you don't like Trump. You'd like to see him removed from office. Trust me, I get all of that. But our commitment to you is always to be honest about how we think these things are going to play out.
Right.
So even while Washington was spinning itself up about Gordon Sondland's blockbuster testimony, bombshell, et cetera, I hope you feel like we've been honest about the fact that we don't see this changing the game. I mean, we saw Republicans stood together voting against impeachment. They even pulled a couple Democrats over. These Senate Republicans are not going to flip. Meanwhile, in cable news, you've had this constant talking point for a year now of, just when the Mueller report comes, that's when things are going to change. And when this happens and this revelation, then things are going to change. No, when we have public hearings, that's when things are going to change. I think we can see now that things are the way they are. There was a great quote from a Wisconsin voter. I think this was an AP story as well, of a nurse who does not want to vote for Trump. She's not planning on voting for Trump. This isn't like a Trump supporter. This is a nurse in her 30s who said, there's just so much information about this impeachment thing. I can't sort out what's fact and what's rumors, so I just don't pay attention at all. I think that represents a lot of people, especially in key swing states.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I've said from the very beginning, it's a disaster for Democrats. They should focus on the election, and that's basically what it is. All you're doing is helping the president in his re-election chances, honestly.
Ultimately, that's...
Another thing another thing I wanted to talk about here is everybody knows there were no fans of Pete Buttigieg.
Not afraid of being critical here.
TheRoot.com wrote a piece. I'm not going to say it, but they called him a Lion MF based on I think a decade-old clip in which Buttigieg said something. I think it was a deceptively edited clip at the same time, and it was basically had said that Buttigieg had suggested that some of the trauma in the black community is because they don't have exemplars of role models. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bit of a paternalistic argument. argument, but he calls me lying. And it turns into this whole critical race jargon about being a white boy and like all this. It's really slanderous stuff. And Buttigieg, to his credit, he called him. And immediately, of course, this guy backs down. He's like, oh, I didn't mean to cause outrage with the headline. And you know, he's still a white man, but he listens or something like. I mean, he cracked like an egg. Okay, which shows you that. And he even said, "I hate taking phone calls." It's like, yeah, if this guy was forced to confront, you know, the idiocy of so much of what he writes,
the hollowness of what he said.
the hollowness of what he says. I just think I mean, we talked here yesterday about identity politics. This was you know, to an identity politics thing to its utter extreme, saying that nobody of another color can have can opine on something, and to call somebody a lying MF. I mean, that is outrageous.
That was the headline. To put that in the headline is over the top, especially. I mean, look. Maybe there would be some comment he could make that would justify that, but these comments were fairly anodyne. I mean, yes, they were a little paternalistic, right?
A little bit,
they didn't acknowledge the disparities in minority communities that lead to these outcomes. That's all true. But to just go over the top because of one comment that someone made 10 years ago, look, as we point out on this show all the time, there are plenty of things you can criticize Pete Buttigieg about.
The black police chief, fake Douglas plan. There's so much. I mean, that's a lying MF comment, by the way. I mean, you can talk about that, but like to put it in that headline like that, I thought it was outrageous. I thought Pete handled himself in a very classy way to call the guy and to talk. He talked to him for almost 20 minutes. It'd be very difficult for somebody like me to do that. I mean, I would lose my cool. I would sue that person for slander. I mean, it is such an outrageous comment that trended on Twitter all day long. You know, this guy just revels in
the
just
attention,
stoking the attention and the fire, and the hollowness of his arguments.
And ultimately, what did he do? He only helped Pete Buttigieg because even us, who are not the biggest fans of his and have been critical of him, are going to defend him because it was just so over the top. I absolutely
feel the need to defend him. I thought it was the fact that the Root can just publish these slanderous smears against somebody, calling somebody an outright liar, an outright racist, is insane.
MF.
And the media, by the way, celebrated this thing as like, oh my gosh, what like an honest take. This is such BS. This identity politics thing is a cancer within our elites, and I'm glad that Pete Buttigieg. I'm glad that he handled himself in a good manner, and ultimately, of course, this guy backed down. They always do.
Obviously.
And, it's a sad state of affairs that you can write that about somebody, and that you are not blamed as the problem.
Well, and good on Pete for calling him and handling it in the way that he did.
Agreed.
We're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.